Would you have been able to tell this Union soldier was actually a woman undercover? The soldier you see before you is Franklin Thompson, or better known now as Sarah Emma Evelyn Edmonds. Edmonds, originally from Canada, came to the United States to escape her abusive father and an arranged marriage. Said to be a skilled horsewoman and an excellent shot, she fit in quickly with her male counterparts in the Army. Edmonds entered the 2nd Michigan Volunteer Infantry as a male nurse. Because of the poor sanitary conditions on the battlefields and camps, Edmonds got away easily with hiding her true identity from the rest of her comrades. While Edmonds was working as a male nurse, she also went undercover as a black male and Irish peddler. While disguised as the black male, she went behind enemy lines and worked with slaves and took note of the Confederate fort the slaves were building and the position of the mounted guns. Among her excursions to the enemy side, she found a few spies herself, and in regards to one man, stated, "He was a fated man. From that moment, his life was not worth 3 cents." Edmonds spent much of the war helping her fellow Union soldiers and even engaging in battle herself during the Battle of Williamsburg in May of 1862. However, she came down with malaria and in 1863 had to desert her fellow soldiers when she was denied a leave of absence to combat the sickness, lest she be found out. Once healthy again, she came back to help, this time through the Christian Commission as a nurse. However, she never received a pension because of the desertion, and it wasn't until 1897 that it was granted. It was a short-lived pension, as Edmonds died the following year in September. Edmonds was not the only example of women going to war for her country. Many others took up the sword for the North or South or engaged in spy activities. One of the major women to infiltrate the army was Loretta Velasquez. Posing as Harry Buford, Velasquez was half Spanish and eloped with a Confederate officer to escape an arranged marriage to a Spaniard. She begged her husband to take her with him, but he refused, and she disguised herself as a man and left to join the Confederate army. She cut her hair short, glued on a false mustache and beard, and called herself an uncommonly good-looking fellow. She practiced speaking in a low voice and even spitting on the street. In October of 1861, during the Battle of Ball's Bluff in Virginia, Velasquez was given temporary command of a company because the officers were missing or presumed dead, and led the charge against the Union forces. She recalled after the battle that a first lieutenant eventually appeared, saying he broke out of a Yankee prison, but conveniently after the battle had taken place. Another notable woman during this time was Frances Clayton. Clayton took up the call to fight for her country just as Edmonds and Velasquez had, and learned all the mannerisms of a man, including drinking, smoking, chewing, and swearing. Said to be fond of cigars and a gambler, the Union men knew her as Jack Williams. Frances served with her husband Elmer from 1861 to 1863, when he was killed in battle during the Battle of Murfreesboro, December 31st, 1862. Elmer was only a few feet in front of Frances when he died, but she didn't stop fighting. She stepped over his body and charged when the commands came. During the Battle of Fort Donelson in Tennessee, she was wounded but not found out, and during her time in the Army, she participated in as many as 17 battles. These women are a shining example of what it meant to be a nationalist for their country and for their comrades. They were risking not only their safety, but also risked being caught as a woman working for the Union or Confederate Army during the Civil War, and their stories give an interesting perspective from the women themselves, but also from the perspective of the many soldiers they encountered on both sides of a very horrific war. Edmonds being able to read and write says something about her education she may have received in Canada, but her medical training and clandestine behaviors show that Miss Edmonds was a highly educated woman, and the fact that she went into the Army, not being a native-born citizen, shows how she and other immigrants and women felt about the great nation of America, or the would-be Confederacy, and what that stood for those on the outside looking in. That these emerging nations were worth fighting for and preserving, and is a beacon of hope for many wishing to preserve their pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. These examples of a woman's story throughout her time in the Army is important in how it gave insight to how women were viewed in society and how their roles were restrained on both sides, but also how women, such as Edmonds, Velasquez, and Clayton, saw it as their duty to give and to do what they could for their cause in their country.